to explain why we do this.
Ta dishi gyandu dusa ngonzu di kharichin chigi yore lai jura.
Is it really so important for us to think about the forces on two books?
Ta thanda thebni ga la shu khari gyagdu lai jura. Di ga la samlot na khechingu dos thongu dues. Yes.
Thank you for saying that.
Thuche nansa dusu adi.
What is important is that we feel comfortable about analyzing a system through the forces.
Dile de tang ngonzu thanda mala de ju ga la shuk da de du yama judang jura. Di chu de tis made ro indi khashi thik dos.
So that is why we gave you an opportunity to try out your ideas with these forces, and we gave you a long time to discuss with each other.
Dinde yo zani kiranzol tuzu this during butte ins penzu dewa cheda samju khari yume tudur chejura tuzu during ate yus kiranzol.
So when you go out and you see the buildings being built, you will be able to visualize the forces on the lower part of the building by the upper part of the building.
Ta khangba dinzo thoze yegdo di gyo gap so ani thoze oma dila gangma di shu khagas ke khari ge me do da dinzo kiranzo samlo no khogu yo rasti.
Or why are there side supports on the side of temples on the walls to support the walls?
Thana shi chikba dinzo la thanda ramdek che chi do wala khyang indi ge do di khari chini ge me da dinde samlo na li do asti wa dinzo.
Or what the shape of different roofs, what impact that makes on the forces on the building.
Khangbe tho ge do di ge du gala ni khangbe gi tho gi ip ta me de ge do di ani shugen khari khari tigi me da khangbe de la shugen khari tigi me dil pa be ni tho di ip ta me de yungu do astilo.
So now that we have understood these two books one on top of the other,
ta thanda thep chi gala chik section do di gala ngonjo todang di go chu ruas.
I want to ask the following question about a small change to this scenario.
Ta thanda di nedan stuen do di gala ni jo chunchu stain is.
So I have book 1 on top of book 2 on top of the table.
Ta thanda thep thangbo di thep ni be thola yores thep ni bo di chokje thola yores.
And I go and I press with my finger on top of book 1.
Ngi zugu digi thep thangbo sta digal ma nemba inas.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forces. I want you to tell me which of those forces will change and which of those forces will not change.
Ta thanda jyotis tang sa zugu nemni. Di nemdu gala del shugna yo. Di shugna ni khandi la jo du res an khandi jo du mares khenan ju shiro chis.
So I want you to talk this over with the person next to you.
Ta di jo khandi du re du mare la jura di khenan ju nyetam le yo da ni yo ra poran ju khenan ju nanglo thodur shiro chis.
For 1 minute, and then we will discuss this as a large group.
Thanda su su nyendam le yo la thodur chel kama chi gyes di jela ani jinda samanyam do thodur cheyes.
So my finger pushes down on book 1. So are there any forces that do not change?
One force do not change.
Which force does not change?
Gravitational force. Gravitational force.
So the gravitational force on the book by Earth does not change. So the Earth pulls exactly the same way on the books. So let's say that I'm pushing down with a force that is equal to 4 newtons.
The man name is Shukjura. di kesi Newton nal matyon by na Newton shi by nas zugu iman di.
So there is an additional force on here which is 1/5 of this force. This is the force on book 1 by Stamatis.
Ta di shuk ji chuen do di Newton ni ba cha shana lo di khalan zugu iman gyo just Stamatis zugu iman gyo shuk di res ni lana di chikchang nga cha chikchai ro di ringdung digas ts.
Did I say 2 newtons or 4 newtons? I forget.
Before you said 4. No. The she in the sarangja and the.
I forgot. Okay, so this does not change. I have an additional 4 Newton force here. So what happens to this force?
The dig your room are a sheras, but then should dra. Digala nembe and the shook hurry lana zugu name you shook she the ras the Newton she. The deal hurry your do rest the harchi rest. It increases.
To what value?
Toro dur lara, chirodona ani tanga hazu chai rest. It becomes 14.
Okay, this force does not change.
Dig your room are ras.
Does this force change?
Dig your the do rest. They should. Yes.
What value does it become?
The your do na the tanga jura your dur lavora hazu chai rest. 14.
This becomes 14 newtons. What happens to the force on book 2 by the table?
The ditchupshi chai res chira. Dila do the tebnibe gala jose shu gyajora. Dil kharchung res. It becomes 20.
So it becomes 20.
Daddy gang do res and yishila de. Tisamindo.
Very well done. Very well done. So, so far we have thought and practiced situations where an object is not moving. So, here is an example of 2 objects that are not moving. I have this object which is a little pan. And I have another object that can slide. This object is not moving, so what can I say about the total force on it? The total force, the sum of all the forces is 0. So the earth is pulling on it. And the string is pulling on it up. Now, because the string is pulling on it up, this is pulling the string down. So it is pulling the string down. It is pulling, 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 pulling. So the string must be pulling this object. So there is a pulling force this way. It is a force on this object by the string. But we said that the sum of all the forces has to be 0. So if this is Bryce-la, we have a force pulling this way. So there must be a force pulling on it this way. Who is exerting that force?
Frictional force.
It is the frictional force, that is exactly right. It is the frictional force on this object by the surface.
Res darshu di cha de res darshu di khol gya de lana kyakin di che gyasa di cha de res kang de kyakin wo de.
So the way that I think about the frictional force, may I give this to you? The way that I think about the frictional force is that the lower surface, when I look at it microscopically, looks like this.
Tangajo ma thamo shu ta waina thanda darshu la ta waina ngobu ni do ngobu oma jura digi ngoidil ta waina ma thamo shu ta waina den do shtung res ngoidela.
And the top surface looks like this.
And gang jura di khande thungur la waina den thungur res.
So when the
ngobu gang de wa jura di ke shi or thamo ma ta waina.
When this string is pulling this way,
kuba digi thingi ora chujo thembe kapsus.
The lower surface is pushing that way.
Kuba digi chujo thendu gala ome ngobu jura ngoi jura digi phajo thingi res.
Now if I go and I rub this
ta khesing e dila inde darwainas digala
and I make it smoother,
dar ni jambu soainas,
it is easier for this to move.
ta jambu chadu gala gangdi gudyo ta jilela chai ruas gangdi wadi jambu chadu.
And then if I could make it perfectly smooth,
tandu ta jambu jamjang soainas ra yang thabi jambu do soainas,
then the lower surface would not be able to exert any force on the upper surface.
jambu shu
Frictional
soainas
force.
ra ta oma jora ngobu oma di ngoi digi darshu gi thanda shuk jora di kya thum mares gangdi thelo chini ya ma dar dug res.
So a very, very smooth surface does not exert a frictional force.
ta khesi ngobu hande chen ngoi jambu shu yo aina darshu di kya thu yo mares.
So
this block has two surfaces.
ta di thanda ngobu chdo di shing tushi dila ngoi ni res dila.
This surface is much more rough
ngoi ni du ngoi di josh do di tsuba yo res.
than this surface.
Di jola durwa ina phajo di tsuba do di yo res kheba.
I added some paper clips
Ni shobu zinje khashe ji digala ma shayus.
so it moves.
Ta di gudyo tang swas thanda ngobu di.
But on this surface,
Ta ngoi phajo di jaswa
which is much more rough,
ngoi shemba di khari re tsubu yo ra di shadus
it doesn't move.
gudyo tang mares di.
So what we want to do now is we are going to do an experiment outside.
Sure.
Okay.
And I think we should do it across the way so we don't disturb all the classes here.
So we're going to do an experiment outside, but next to the building on that side.
Jinga shemba shta phajo drone en nganju takji di che yin isra.
So I'm going to let go of this block. I want you to notice, how does this move? How does this block move?
Ta di lu ra di shing tu shish do di yugu khande chig du taru chesra
So watch the block move.
I told you.
Oh, you put a weight on it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Let's do that again without the weight, because I don't think you need the weight to see it.
The thing is that the Changdo di Shaswa, Chugo Childress, the major chick towns.
All right, so we're going to do this one more time.
The younger chick in the city, Dajidi.
Oh, so just let it happen? So we're gonna cause an accident.
The Truji Shuer the Lastel.
But hopefully no one will be hurt.
The Suji never chang Mare Lasta.
But notice how fast is this block moving?
The Tenan Chiruchis, the Tandashing to Shishtoa, Yolu Hagas to Yumidi.
How fast is it moving right now?
Tanda Yolu do Dusa. It's not moving.
It's not moving, so 0.
hang on just a moment. How many forces are exerted on, or horizontal forces are exerted on this block right now?
Tanda Shung Lata Waina Ra, the Shung La Shuk Jura, Kangni Wall, Gonda, the Yen Yendo, the Introdan Jura, the Tawaina Shuk Hazu Gasha Stila.
How many forces? Horizontal forces.
Tell a Gonda, tell a Shuk Jura, Kagas Gasha Standadilla.
The sum of all the forces is 0. How many individual forces are exerted?
The Tandadina Tawana Shuk Rede Tawana Hazu dos. Shukji Yumare.
How many objects are touching the block?
And there's Tukshish Doa, Dilomobo Hazu took the shas. 3 objects.
3 objects. The string is pulling it this way.
Kuba di cho think doas.
Frictional force is pulling it this way.
Darshu digi pajo thingi roas.
And Brysla's finger is pushing it that way.
Bryce la zugi pajo bugu roas.
So you very correctly said that the sum of all the forces will be 0.
In Kiranso itagda sons, Tanda Shug Yora disum, Kazuyo di Tangma Domba and Kundum Legor Chairi sons, Tagda Resti.
But now we are going to remove this force and we are going to make the sum of all the forces be not 0.
That Tanda Harichir Laoina, Zugudi Ma Pi Resra, Lagochang Mares, the Macha Gauso Ani, Kundum Gishuk Jora, Lego Digmares, Jodures.
Ready?
30 US.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. What did you notice?
Tenang Harichung son still. It moved very fast.
So it was not moving.
Yugu Chigiyo Marwas.
Then it started to move.
Then Yugu Chia go to res.
And it moved faster
Then go to res.
and faster
Go to res.
until it hit the end.
Then the tudo but the go to res, go to res.
Do you agree?
US adila.
So we are going to have you take your force meters, the force meters that you made,
Kanzo ni shuk jelchi yuji soimba dikhe res ruga sama.
and
we're going to have to work in big groups.
Ani tanda di chego chidu gala ruga di tis cheru so ki res.
So each group will either take a skateboard or a roller skate.
Ta kiranzo yana di skateboard yana roller skate do adini. Yana di chik namugu res.
And what we want you to do, first, please don't stand on these.
Ta tangsho chik shue yes di gala ya shanya jura di manang roches. Mashang roches.
If you want, you can sit on them.
Mashuna di res. Kesi shuk de shu.
Because if you sit, there's a less distance to fall.
Kana shue na ni marie tabe jura di gangda dis nyung ru res.
So what you're going to do is you're going to apply a force.
Ta khari chair lawa na chego takje jura di nala shu gares.
And you're going to apply a constant force. That's okay, I'm okay.
Nyombo ji gaya jura di gyagu res.
And he's going to keep applying the same force the entire time.
Ta takje cheo kapsura di ringla ani khorangi shu gaya jura nyombo ji thara shu khaju gya di thara gaya res.
Okay? And you're going to notice, how does my speed change as he applies the constant force?
Ta 다 코랑기 슉 대가랑 게도 갈라 아니 코랑기 욕세 줘라 지 교가 근데 두고 매 디타 구고 이랬어.
Okay.
We're a buddy system.
You're a buddy.
Ready?
자리에서.
So this classroom is small. We have more space outside.
chilo dona saja chera di jinghan te sunji do za phai la saja che res chilo do ina
The person pulling needs to do a few things.
ta thingin jura di samlo na khashe ji shagwe and you res di chego che
They need to look at their force meter and make sure they're always applying the same force.
ta thingin di lega khar la na lingin chi khar cha la na the shuk jura shuk se chi grang thing gu res thindu
And they need to adjust how fast they're moving
an thana shi yogu che jura dil pa be di chi gu res khanan shuk thara shagura yama su su gu jo tang du dil pa be gu jo tang gu res shuk thara shan
Okay? Try this. See what you notice.
di kheran jo chego de chine an tonang khar chungu do chik siro ches
What did you notice about my speed?
an kheran jo thanda di price ki chik ten sa dil ani thanda yogu che gi di jose jura dil tonang khar chung sons it moved faster
Faster. Did it keep getting faster?
Yoro do esa. Yes.
So see if you've noticed something similar when you go outside.
Ta thanda price ka ji thanda chego chi do yoro do lara dende do kheran zo ta ji chi do wal tharan thong do chik siro ches
No accidents.
ta dabgyon de machine lele chi ninda
If you are more prudent, like I would be,
More cautious.
more cautious,
ta khuyang bu che yang bu nga do chi wai nasra ani sab chin chiro ches de
you can do the same thing without putting anyone's life in danger.
kheran zo inji bi ji mi so nyenga de shagwe che kei ma res dende chi nai do res
Be careful not to do it like this.
dende do ma chiro ches tonang ches ra
You want to do it like this so that this pulls horizontally.
tendang jura the khaptu do de khaptu thero ches gang ni ende ma thyo chini khaptu thero ches
And try to keep the extension of the rubber band the same the whole time.
an thana shi thanda kheran su gi the di kharala na gigda pejo chigura gigda gi ringdung jura tharan shani thero ches thindu
Because we want you to try and apply the same force all the time.
khai sana takje chhe ring jura dila ani shuk se tharang gi gyani ani takje di cheres dila du gala gigda ringdung di tharan sha ura
Okay?
seo cha se
Okay, so send some people from your group to come and collect a skateboard,
roga re ne mi re te phe da di khare roller skate the skateboard kholo di khari bu na
아니 갈레티로 다좀 구조적으로 구조제서 선이 안던 거도 기안도 구조적인 야마타니 말이야. 뒤집어지죠 저런 튀는 거는. 뒤튀는 거도 그 조세제로 얘는 요한 로인데 뒤다 인기가 저런 이건들 다 나도 저런 내가 이제 요한 개조 진도 이제 안 나이 말게. 난 너무 말했어. 콘조세노라 아무리 바로 쇼쇼쇼도 내가 나왔는데 쿠폰도 요. 꽃집밥 같은 거는 주로 다서 요런 거예요. 꽃집밥 같은 내려야만 내려. 그 같으니 주노하니 가서 주 전조 마송아 있나로. 아니 코어니야 마총도. 어이 저시야. 저가 단단해서 세도 되고. 일거리가 저런 연기 안 한데 못다 그랬어. 나 좀 전조로 됐다. 야 내걸
저런 거 좋아하지. They do this. Okay. Because chikpa, right?
So you said like if it's at rest, if the object is not moving, you said the forces, all the forces is equal to zero. Yeah, sum of all equals. So what does it mean? His question is that. Can't hear This question is trying to clarify by the response. So if you use a rope and try to pull that wall, there is no changes to the so there is no difference, there is no change in the atoms of these walls if it tries to pull that wall.
Sure there is. Yes, there is.
You're realize. There are changes, right? This course,
If I put a hook in here, a hook.
The hook you are
The wall will deform a little bit.
Hook ji shawa ina ko yip jura da yo do this two res.
And then if I could put
okay, he's saying that if you just tie it around the wall with the rope, so does it change? Okay, like this, if you just wrap it around the wall.
This will break. This will break because this cannot exert a large enough force.
Then it will damba in us ra. Did damba in a ditch res. Highland dig should the jura, Madame Niche res. So their question is there any change in that wall if it tries to pull it using a rope?
Yes, there is. We can do an experiment inside. The reason why I took out the 10 rupees is because if I have 10 rupees, but I owe you 10 rupees, my wealth is zero.
다 단다 배순지 샤야 뛰어서 고무추 뛰는다 나라 락발 고무추 통구도 왔는데 요로와 이내 갈 고무추 뛰고이나 야 쿠란 다 벤주 가져요 라와이나 레고 차기 요로와스
So it is equivalent to zero, but that does not mean that I have no money and I owe no money.
diladu gala ta legor chagi yor ladu gala pesha yo mare la da te go yo mare la dikecha yo marwas kyondom dadu gala legor rosh thongu yorwas.
So when we say that for a stationary object the sum of all the forces is zero, that does not mean that there are no forces exerted.
diladu ngoboji yogu chigi mewa inastra ta shu khazu yo di kyondom legor chagi lana dil shu yo mare di khu yo mares kyondom legor chagi yores la sha shena. If an object is at rest, is there any frictional force? So he's saying like frictional force arises when there is some movement, when someone tries to push it. So is there any frictional force when the object is at
Right
rest?
now, no. There is no frictional force between me and the floor.
Kheba yorelas raulu yores chigla ta thanda pezun diru shawaina mara de ya sham de dos digap darshu yo mares
But right now, there is.
ta thanda gujodan ma khombach gyasa digap su darshu de yores
Because I am pushing back on the floor
khais na ngarangi thanda di shala digal ma bugi yores.
and the floor is
So-
pushing me forward.
So his question is, so frictional force arises when there is some movement or some pushing.
There is a tendency for movement. A tendency for movement.
Yogu chiegi da diba rola ora dende roji yudu ani ta darshu di ligi yores.
Thank you.
Oh, grabaso. We just now, many of us, many of you, we did many experiments and we acted like a scientific community.
Tanda nganzu tanda taji chemba digap su ani taji chego mangbuji chi yoresra. Ngara zu chidang di shijo di khari ro cha diolana cheri gi choba jora dende chidang ro chi res.
So scientists, they work in teams, they conduct experiments, and then they share the results with their peers.
Diladu cheri ba den zo khari nang gi lawa na quran zo taji chi an taji chi yu dungje khari thyo ma di sangma phasu phenju thudur chi dende chini yama shere che dende chi yores.
So let's share our experiments, what we noticed with each other.
Diladu tanda cheri ba taji chi thana ji khiran zo taji chi ra taji chi ju toshi khari chungwe me da dungje khari thobi me din zo la khiran zo phenju thudur nang ro chis.
So please, can somebody volunteer? What did you notice?
Ta thunang kha tanda taji nang ra changmai thunang khari chungso la jora di an khiran zo nang ni thanglang ji yashan ni sungro chis. Ma shuna itir da chik sungro chis thanglang.
Yeah, one at a time, and let's get the microphone.
Oh, ina chik chik in da shedu do. So even when we apply the same force, the object moves faster.
The object moved faster and faster. And what kind of experiment were you doing? Were you using a skateboard or the roller skate?
Taji chidugal khandi pheju chi la leble skateboard jyo di pheju chi roller skate chunga di kangba chi bu jyo di pheju chi di che di skateboard.
Skateboard. Okay. Any other similar or different experiments?
Ta taji shimba chi jyo yo esa di da mandai.
거기 이제 콜로시지오가 베트남아니 베이트켄 다 올라다 슈다다 메베는 파이어 수요가
Shuk di tagda lana balance me oina.
In Tibetan.
Ta thanda thendu gala ra shuk ji tagda chma the oina ya yo ro da ma yo ro kyo ai jora di yungu dos lan di shesra taji shidu thanang chi di chong sons. So when he pulls with unbalanced force, the person moves right and left, like it wobbles.
So there's some wobbling back and forth, yeah, and some crashing into walls too, I think.
Rollas, yama, gujota ma se khashet sibola dab in the chair rollas.
What other experiments? Even if you notice the same thing, because many different experiments were done, we should hear all the different types of results.
Diladu takje changma ina ra. Diladu gal thunang khari chunga meta dumde minra yora thunang chijo kiran juni khonge thu du sungro chis. Spring day. Khari nyoro do. spring di the shukse chikpa ina ge thung ru de ale shukse chikpa in by name shukse chikpa in name. Okay, so when he pulls, even if he pulls with the same force, when he goes further away, the springs compresses more.
What do you mean? He pulls with the same force,
but still, like when he moves further away, like after some time, it becomes like the spring compresses.
Less or more? So the more the spring compresses, the spring is the measure of force we have.
The spring di thanda ma di chung rudlara khum rudlara dilla du ding onzo shubse di tagi roalas.
shubse odire theyum gura mo shubse dire thyen chira tare bu themu tsoba odire yae thym.
So it becomes compressed when we try to pull that person.
Oh, so when you pull on the person, the more you pull, the more the force is.
That manga thingi rolas dilla du gala shuk manga rolas di.
shi nyori cha dije ne mo thaba di par moraji theni drundra moraji theni dire drut param yere bu
thanda motor mar thanda digala shela spring di thanda spring khara da shukje thagaran che in spring khumgu dulara. Okay, so okay, so he said like when he pulls for some distance, the spring compresses and we don't have to pull, but still the person moves. Yeah, it's still in motion. We don't need to apply any force after some time.
Oh, so you're saying once the person starts to get moving and the person is rolling, you can apply less force and the person will keep moving.
Ta dilla du gala inde rolas thangbo thingra shukji ge res di jela ani gujo tang sayo jela ani shuk nyunga jana ge midi yogu chidi dula di roas
more ta di jiwa di ani kaze jona yo anda de ani bari shimogo cha res kila.
So when it moves faster, there's no need of any force to pull from this end. Kama karcha sums jela. After around 3 seconds, we don't have to pull, but still the person is still in motion.
You can keep the person moving without applying much more force. Okay. So what happened when you applied the same force as best as you could consistently throughout the experiment?
Shuk thegarangi thembainas tanda gelagira shuk gyawam dulara shuk thegarangi thembainas ra ani midi yogu chigura du yogu la khari kheba dudus. It moves faster.
It moves faster. So now I've heard two people say that.
Ta tanda yoru dudu lajara meaning ishe sa sonstira. So if he applies the same force, but the person is moving with a greater force, right? Like higher speed. So you said that there is frictional force.
Yeah.
So what is the like even there is frictional force, the person is moving faster, right? With the same force.
Yeah.
So what is the relation? Devara. Darshukta shuk ten jora dini para dewa khari resra. Kyokseda darshu para. Okay, so what's the like relationship between frictional force and the speed of that person?
That's a very good question. But right now, you're teaching each other about what you learned. So I'm not going to be, I won't answer any questions. You have to share what you noticed. But you also noticed, the same with the two other monks that shared, that with the same force, the person on the skateboard keeps going faster and faster and faster. And you ask a very good question about what is the frictional force and how does that change?
Dila du kiran su gi tanda darshuk di korla darshuk lana khande jires an thana shi di gyo khande dur la jura digal tyo ya ushu tang sons.
Other observations?
Ani topshi shimba chung sues tana.
Wait, here and then you. 1, 2, Chigni.
응보대 그런 진조로 숙제집과 돈대도 진조 번로요도 현재 미국 총선이 응보대 그런 대동 뜻으로 숙제 촬영과 있는 걸 내버려서 가지고 있는 레벨을 그룹한 메시지를 동안에
So when the object is moving, I felt that the object is trying to have force which is where the sum of the forces is not equal to 0. The objects try to reach that force, to attain that force.
Do you mean the person sitting on the skateboard?
Me ma dejo jura handa skateboard ka dejo jura dik korshi yuesa. Khare dronde mesa. Karsun begala. Karsun begala.
Ko tambo zero tatar da. Tambo ko zero nuko tu ba. Zero nuko tu ko zero ran ko. Tuje je
Guji tanga yo maris.
Ta chi ti thein ro ka dan theya de ko shukti ki pa to thein na yo. Ko chenjo she ti korang nama zero to ya te to ranjat ni ya to me to she to me.
Pezun chigi durre. Alle chigi durre. Okay, that object, the person, for instance, so that person tries to attain the net force which is equal to 0. That object tries to attain that force when the object is moving at a faster speed. He felt that way.
It sounded like he felt like the forces want to add up to a net force of 0. That was his sort of intuitive feeling.
Kirangi chorro alas kala di. Chorro di. Sonan ke sonsra. The ma dejo di gela kiran ra. Ma dejo di gela kiran ra. Onde. Re. Okay, he sat on the rollerboard.
Yeah.
Kadagi somade karisna nipote tense de shunyo bachega. Ena chala jugu jiora. Chala jugu de jama jai bache. Kon jugu de somade chala jugu de pe yurna boge go.
Kharchi gyo agi.
Chala jugu chi chau chau jiora. Le jama jache. Ta ko tengi de somade shise de ena sache da mana tengi yo. Ta kon juba no de chala de yurna chi go sa somade.
Jogodu kharchi go le chala de. Ale yang ro So he felt that when an object moves, when it pulls with the same force, the object becomes lighter.
Lighter? You mean
in terms of weight? You
mean it's easier to pull?
So he feels that the object became lighter.
So if you put them on a scale, they would weigh less?
Ani kera samchu la da yang ro du la du gala ani jise kya sa gal shao ena ko jigo yang ayo ro sam gu dues. No. No, it doesn't.
But he felt that there was a difference between the object in motion and the object when it was at rest.
Ne kerang kebar thong ro las ngobu di yu sonne de kapsu da yogu cheu kapsu kebar thong ro as.
세지 그런 거 태어나서 좀 좋은 거라. 이거는 좀 제출들이야 이거 추운 놈이가 있나? 토가 이렇게 잘라들 제시 양은 놈이면 인 좋은 거 같아.
슈크 디 랑자 체 지고 디 랑자라 딘데 인도
그건 좋은 거고 세지 그런 태어나디. 좋은 어디서 오는 거 제출들이야 이거 추운 놈이가 있나? 그건 좋은 거던데 토가 잘라 제시 양은 좋은 거.
So teshu di rangja res laura teshu di kesi mama cha wainas. So when a person pulls with the same force but the object moves faster, right? So if there is no change, like if the force, there is no less force from the horizontal side, horizontal force.
There's no rest force?
No, less force.
Less force, right?
From horizontally. So there is no way that only option left is the object's weight has become lighter. I mean, like, has reduced.
Okay. Now I understand where you're thinking about this. Okay. So these are interesting, wonderful observations and interesting inferences about what is happening.
How
many of you noticed that the object sped up?
Objects?
The person on the skateboard or the skate increased speed when you pulled with the same force. Did anybody think that it did not speed up and go faster and faster?
Okay, yes.
You and you. Okay, we have two monks that don't think the person on the skateboard went faster and faster. So what do we do? We're a community. We're a community of
this guy. Ale mangwa chola chitra ke ko da dichi ko thong mangme lata ores lere, so we should listen to the majority.
Okay, so we have a few choices. We can ignore them. We can pretend like we're right and they must be wrong. But we might be missing something if we do that. So we should listen to them. Because maybe they can teach us something. And maybe we can teach them something. But see, the thing is, if we ignore them, then we sort of kick them out of our community. And then the next time we do an experiment and a few monks get a different result, and we also ignore them and kick them out. You see, soon we'll have a very small community. There'll just be one of us in this room. Right? So that's not a good thing. So let's listen to them. First, my question is, did you do the experiment? Yeah, okay.
Tadira chala yangbuji shadu gala shukji thangbo thingra thangbo yangbu shadu the lela dos jigo cha shadu gala the diska chorgu dos tra
chala jigo sauji jara jigo sauji jara tambo anan tos cher shik matana 가서 도는 거지. 가서 말티 요거라 따다 요기요 말했어.
알레레 텐두갈 교도도스 알레레.
식체를 마다나. 식체를 단다 건 조세 요거라. 안다치가는 용 예전에 내나 그 가서도 할때
얘라 양부 샤교기 세제라 온디 랑자 샤오에나 가족 교도도스라. 제잔 슈크체로 탱구도스 잘라 주고 사셔나 디로
시제 지금 안테나 시제 그 지금 안테나 아니 잘라 주고 사와 시제 지금 안테나 아주 쪼로
알레 체로 빠르고 키도스 슈
야야 바나
갑도 탱구도스
실체 얘나 가서 높게 때다 그 조스지 로는 나와도
아니 양아 주라 언데 없어 같이 잘라 양보지 샤도 거리
양보지 잡나
테네 갑도 두고도스라 슉 춘주직 템바이나게 갑도 두고도스라 지고 서에도 슉 춘주 대하란 템바이나 껴 두고도스 슉 체로 템고도스라 갑도 레라
지 조건 로는 나와도 시체기도 가서도 도그라 도기 갑도 조선 드리지 콜로라 드리지 조건 나와도 지금
때 겨로 두고도 라와라 두문도 라와라 So when he put a lighter object and he applies the same force, like it moves in a straight line. So when he used heavier object and so when he applies the same force, that object moves in a zigzag way, it wobbles. So when he applies more force, it comes straight.
Okay, but what about how fast it was going?
그냥 직 껴고 둘라라 직 슉충부테나 갑도 두고 둘라라 아니 요새들라 가리 둘라스 개발
요새 식다가나 간에 저는 타나 요새라 제발 문도였어 얘네들이 도스다 도나도 chen 말에
So he is saying like when he applies the same force he didn't notice any change in the speed.
Okay. So he says that he didn't notice any change in the speed.
요새라 개발 문도시라 그런 되는 중레스 But
he's not saying it's not possible. He's just saying he didn't notice it. Okay. So, whoa. I love that you guys have your own microphone.
아니 메제라는 거지 다나 타카는 뭐라도 뒤가 코르테로 나오는데 야 라운이 좀 테마잖아 아니 마데니 테마니는 라운이 야 라운이 좀 테마이나 아니 슈초한다 아니 레다 네
So when a person stands and another person tries to pull it, like he has to apply less force. When a person sits, he has to apply more force. Why is there a difference? When a person is standing and sitting.
That's a good question. Interesting. Do a free body diagram. So I want to know if you agree with the statement I'm going to make. If you apply a constant force, on Tashi sitting on a skateboard, he will keep going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Yes. Imagine if we had a 1 kilometer long, very smooth stretch of pavement.
And
you pushed on Tashi or pulled on Tashi with the exact same force. How fast can you imagine here how fast he would be going after 1 kilometer?
Kilometer chik jela ani khagas chobu dure kheran jo samsu no har dos langa jambu shu jora kilometer chik the view by nare them by nare ra tashi gujo tang ra after 1 kilometer you say ra kilometer chik la ani tashi joglu dures na ma the dure shara yeah he will move joglu khagas di chigres jogru dure theru dure khajigre la He moves faster.
He moves really
He'll
fast.
Move even faster, yeah.
Really, he might be going really fast.
고시 켜는 말
같이 그래
고시 켜는 메시지 안 받아 물론 고시
고시는 강라 강이 메죠 so there is no object blocking its way right
No object blocking its way.
He will keep on moving.
He will keep on moving. Not only will he keep on moving, he will keep moving faster and faster and faster.
Ko draw dir lara mituni. Draw de chibu marwas. Ande yoro durwas. Na. Thanda tashi duduga thingi yoro. Okay, Bryce.
What?
Their question is there someone pulling tashi after 1 kilometer?
Yeah. The constant force the entire time.
Oh, you're less thingy.
Do you want to write down?
So we have agreed on the following thing, it seems to me. That when the net force is 0, the object is at rest.
Tangazu medunchi khari chher lawaina kyondom gi shuk jura di kesile gor himbaina ani ngobo di sorne lyores la di sheres di medunchi res thangme
and a net force that is not 0 the object's speed is constantly changing.
kesi kyondom tanda kyondom shuk jido adi legor memba ina ngobo gi gyokse jora rimbe gyor la jora di gyokse di gyor yores.
So when Tashi is being pulled with a constant net force,
Tashi di shukse chigi tanda ma themba ina sra
the Tashi speed will be faster and faster and faster.
Tashi gyokse jora gyor dures.
So this is worth writing in your notebooks.
Di kenan zo tide na tiwa ina yabu yores.
It's not constant motion. It's constantly changing motion.
With the book and the table, we saw that if the net force is 0, the book is at rest. We can also turn this sentence around and say because the book is at rest, because the book is at rest, the net force must be 0. With the skateboard and our force meters, we found that if the net force is not 0,
tanda skateboard pejo chimba onzo digapsu kesi tanda kyondom shukjido di legor member inas.
The net force is not 0, and not only is the skateboard and Tashi moving, he is moving not at a constantly changing speed.
Diladu tanda kyondom shuk di lego meba ke shigora dende indu wala Tashi di yogu chidi yores yogu cheo masu yogu chedang jura kadu no gyo do denge dende jires yogu chedang di.
So these are two sort of extreme situations.
Diladu nedang bet kora menda ani chade yores dingi.
Object at rest, net force is 0.
Diladu ngobo di sorne yimba kapsu an kyondom shuk di lego res.
if the net force is anything other than 0, then the object moves with a constantly changing speed.
Dila dugala tanda kisi kandeji na nedang tanda kyondom shuk de lego member inas ngobo di yogu chidang jora dila jose di duo do di res.
So these are rules that we're discovering that we can apply to all objects.
Ta di drodang ge chik tim loj da di ngobo kandeji na ngazo digal char chou res.
Not just Tashi and a skateboard and not just a book.
Ta tanda ngazo pechun shasa ti tashi da tanda kholo yo skateboard din zul sharo thep da din zo di chupu mares ngobo kandeji na di jare res.
But really everything in the material world.
Dila du chi ta jigde nal khari thwa yo yo rang ro so di sangmal di jar na dig yo res drodang di.
Enjoy your lunch.
Shela nye bo churros.
We'll see you here, Nipa.
Ani chuzu nye wala yengyo.
Okay.